Shabbat Shalom. So I'm grateful to Rabbi Fenster for the opportunity to speak with you a little bit and to share some of my thinking, which has really come out of conversations I've had with all of you and also out of some learning I've been doing recently. So, on the Jewish calendar, this week's Shabbat is known as Shabbat Shuvah, or the Shabbat of Return. Shuvah, or return, is a word with layered meanings. It shares a root with teshuvah, which we know to mean atone, and I have recently learned also means respond. Perhaps for many of you, like me, the concept of this particular Shabbat having a special name is not one that you were familiar with before you came to Kol Ami. Perhaps some of you are just hearing about it for the first time right now. Well, I grew up with a sense of the solemnity of the 10 days of awe, and often pictured those words in all caps when my mother, whose father had been raised Orthodox, said them out loud. For most of my life, I was not aware of any special significance to this Shabbat between Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur. In fact, it's unlikely that I thought overly much about it even as Shabbat, having clearly, it would have seemed to me then, fulfilled any religious obligations by attending very extensive services on the holidays that fell in my mind just before and again right after. Partly due to the learning I've been able to do here at Kol Ami, though, and also because it's on this Shabbat that I mark the yahrzeit of my mother, Ellen Lemberg, who passed away in 2019, I've begun to understand something more about the idea of Shabbat Shuvah and to think especially about its connection to the notion of return. As someone generally interested in language and literature, I sometimes become obsessed with a particular word. The sound of it, the rhythm of the syllables, the ideas it conjures, the other words it relates to, all of these can lead to a single word getting stuck in my head for weeks, to the point where I'm finding that I hear it in my mind or notice it everywhere. And those of you who are like this, you'll nod, you know what your word is, you're picturing it right now, I know you are. Normally, around the high holidays, the word that I get stuck on is hineni. Well, you may not all have this weird word thing that I do. My guess is that at least some of you also spend time thinking about hineni in the days and weeks before the high holidays. Every year, as Rosh Hashanah got closer on the calendar, I would look forward to encountering the moment in the telling of the story of Abraham and Isaac when my very, very limited Hebrew vocabulary would be useful, when I could think with just a smidgen of self-satisfaction, aha, that one I recognize in the original. Leonard Cohen's gravelly voiced intoning of Hineni and his 2016 album You Want It Darker seemed expressly designed to intensify this experience. Now I could hear Hineni in Leonard Cohen's voice in my head, an echo that was present even during services and that somehow brought together the Jewish past with the current day. Of course, with this word, its deep meaning and importance is part of what brings it to mind. Hineni has special valence within Judaism, appearing when various figures in the Torah seek to signify their presence in response to being spoken to by God or by angels. It is also a word of response parents and children offer one another. For many of us, Hineni is familiar as a word spoken by Abraham 3 times, in response to God, again to his son Isaac, and a 3rd time to the angel who bears the message telling him to spare Isaac's life. This single word represents a connection to God, a way to signify our willingness to serve a divine purpose and to indicate as clearly as we possibly can our presence as Jews in the world. Hineni, in other words, is an affirmation. For years, it has offered me clarity, certainty, familiarity through repetition, and through how it allows us to say something about our individual and collective identity. With my tendency to fixate on a word, in some general spiritual way, thinking about Hineni, anticipating its arrival in our service, was part of how I prepared for the holidays, of moving toward teshuvah or return, and, forgive this pun, I was here for it. This year, though, things have been feeling different. To quote our rabbis from the Welcome Back Shabbat last week, there's a lot happening. We are struggling over events far away and closer to home, and agonizingly over divisions within the larger Jewish community. With all the challenges of these times, the many months of excruciating pain and worry, and more uncertainty ahead, As we moved closer to the holidays during the month of Elul, a different word, Ayeka, where are you, took hold of me. I would not let go. Notably, Ayeka is a question rather than a declaration. Also notably, like Hineni, it has resonance for Shabbat Shuvah and its theme of return, in that it touches on the idea of where we are located, not only physically, but more importantly, in relationship to God and to ourselves. Ayeka is the word God uses in the Bible to ask Adam and Eve where they are after they have eaten from the tree of knowledge. As we know all too well, this is a difficult moment. They are hiding themselves and cannot answer the question with the robust certainty we will hear later from Abraham. We know that when Adam and Eve are asked, Ayeka, God must already know the answer. Yet the question offers them the chance to make sense of themselves, to answer bravely and honestly, even in their imperfection. Ayeka is a new word for me, one I first learned about in a class I took this summer. During one of our sessions, we were put into pairs with a partner with the instruction to ask them, Ayeka, where are you? And give them the opportunity to answer. If the person answering paused or lost the thread of what they were saying, we asked again, Ayeka, Ayeka, where are you? Implicit in the question is not only where are you physically, but where are you in the spiritual work of doing good in the world, of responding to where you are in life and what life is demanding of you right now. Where are you in your beliefs, in your feelings, in your joy, and in your grief? And what does that mean for what you will do? Answering was not easy for any of us. In my own case, initially, I went with the obvious and a clear attempt to deflect. I am in a classroom with air conditioning. I am sitting on a hard chair. I am in summer school. My partner, younger than me but wise for her years, was having none of it. Ayeka, she asked again. I'm troubled, I responded. Things are hard, so much violence, politics, all of it. I stopped. We sat in the quiet. And then, again, she asked, Ayeka. That question, insistent, moving us past generalities through its repetition, urged us to try to say what was on our minds and in our hearts, to give voice to where we were in that moment in July, which now somehow feels like a million political years ago. And things have not gotten easier since then. I have found it difficult to shake loose from that intense encounter. During the long summer days that followed, I often found myself returning to the quiet of our hushed conversation, the intensity, the lightly accented Ayeka of my study partner's voice as I was asked to find my way towards articulating where I was and what I felt. Ayeka. It was the word in my mind throughout July and August, the one that followed me through my long summer days. And even with the arrival of the high holidays and all the power of Hineni, for me it has also been the word of these first few days of fall, these days of awe. I am talking about this with you because this question, where are you, feels so critical to ask right now when we have been constantly upset, angry, fearful, indignant, and worried, and also sometimes joyful and awestruck and moved and laughing and crying. Ayeka, if there has ever been a time when we could hide from the complexities of being human, this is not it. At the beginning of this new year, we are contending with the question, as another one of my teachers asked me recently, what does it mean to sit inside something that has real problems? To ask how this applies to ourselves, to our loved ones, to our multiple communities, and to our world. Answering the question of where we are then means finding the strength and love and compassion to stay with those problems, to help in some way to lessen or lighten them, to figure out what our contributions may be, and then, when we are ready, with hope and humility, to say, Hineni. Tonight we celebrate the arrival of Shabbat Shuvah, with its emphasis on the promise and the work of return. Folded into the concept of return is the implication of being lost, of having strayed from what is best or most holy. Yet in order to return, we first have to know something about where we are. This is not an earth-shatteringly new insight, I know. But in this moment, asking ourselves deep questions about where we are, taking the time to do the hard work of sifting through our beliefs, our responses, our ways of being in the world, feels more urgent than ever. The introspection demanded of us by these 10 days comes as a gift. The requirement to look inward, a religious obligation, but also, as much at any time in my life, an ethical one. Sometimes, though, words may not give us all we need. This year, along with the shofar blasts arriving via email from Kol Ami during the month of Elul, I signed up to receive daily messages from the Jewish Spirituality Project. The messages offer another form of spiritual preparation for the holidays by encouraging recipients to complete daily writing prompts. Recently, Rabbi Jordan Bronig, author of these prompts, reflected on the power of the shofar to express something beyond language, including some of the emotions that we are feeling now. He writes, "There is rarely a year that goes by when we don't feel some estrangement. We feel distant from ourselves, from family or community, far from the Holy One of blessing. What if the call of the shofar was simply a cry for reconnection? Perhaps you are a long way from where you started or where you hope to be. What would return feel like? What longing do you hold this year, hard to articulate in words, that might be communicated in the cry of the shofar?" I am comforted by Rabbi Bronig's perspective on the shofar, glad to be reminded that sometimes it takes time to find the perfect word, that we may not right now know exactly what to say. As we welcome this Shabbat Shuvah, this Shabbat of return, and as we head into the remaining days before Yom Kippur, I invite you to consider, what will you hear when the shofar sounds again? How will you respond? Are you ready for the space of Hineni? And can you make room to ask yourself, gently but insistently, Ayeka?